It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, a man arrested over a suspected poisoning at a children's summer camp. Leicestershire police were called after receiving reports of children feeling unwell at a camp in Stathern on Sunday. 8 were taken to hospital but have since been discharged. The 76-year-old man remains in custody. Also ahead, will nurses be next to strike? The Royal College of Nursing is threatening to ballot its members unless the government boosts pay. They say they are deeply undervalued. We'll be speaking to the union later this hour. Plus, Britain's biggest police force set to double its use of live facial recognition technology amid cuts to the Met's budget. Civil liberties groups say the move is incredibly concerning. And the warning, food prices are set to soar again. We'll speak to a consumer finance expert to find out what you can do to keep your costs down. Well, that's coming much more on the UK Tonight. But we begin the show tonight with an alleged poisoning at a summer camp in Leicestershire. A 76-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of administering poison, which led to 8 children being taken to hospital. He remains in custody this evening. We can bring in Sky's Oliver Whitfield-Mircic, who's been following this story for us today. We know very little at this stage, the police understandably being quite guarded with the information. But what do we know at this stage?
So what we know is that this location, this lodge, has been used for years for young people to go and have an away day, a residential trip where they stay for a few days. There's a sports hall, big kitchen, a big place for everybody to meet up and go away as a group. We know that on Sunday, at some point, the police got a referral that there was concerns for children's safety. Children were not feeling well. However, police and paramedics did not attend the site until the Monday. Now, we've been told from Leicestershire Police that this 76-year-old man was arrested outside a pub a few miles away from where this happened. Now, all of the children were assessed. 8 were then sent to the Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham, where they were then released. So it was all as a precaution. We do not know what the nature of this alleged poisoning is. Was it something to do with food? Was it something to do with a substance? We don't know what the necessary relationship between this man and the children was. But the police are investigating. This is what Assistant Chief Constable James Avery had to say earlier on.
Following an initial assessment, I can confirm 8 children were taken to hospital as a precaution and have all since been discharged. Officers have been in contact with the parents or the guardians of those children who were taken to hospital. I can confirm that a 76-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of administering poison or a noxious substance. He remains in custody at this time.
SJ, the major incident team from the East Midlands Specialist Force, where they're going to have officers from all of the different parts of the East Midlands, are taking control of this case. They're taking it very seriously. They have now got the ability to question the suspect for another 24 hours. That has been granted by a judge. All eyes then remain on the authorities to release any more information in the coming days.
OK, Oliver, thank you. We'll keep across that story for you here on Sky News and bring you more as and when we get it. A fresh report into the death of a 5-year-old boy who lost his life after being sent home from hospital has found the NHS failed to listen to his mother's concerns. Yusuf Nazir died from sepsis 8 days after he was rushed to Rotherham Hospital, only to be sent home with antibiotics. His mother has been telling Sky News the findings of today's report haven't brought closure for her family. Our health correspondent Laura Bundock has this report.
Yusuf deserved better. Every child does.
Yusuf Nazir went into hospital with tonsillitis and never returned home.
Every night when I close my eyes, I hear Yusuf's helpless voice in my ears saying, "Mummy, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I really can't." And the image of him being handed over to me after his life ended, as though someone had torn my heart out and placed it in my hands.
An independent report into his death details several critical failings. how Yusuf had 23 separate healthcare contacts across organisations with no single coordinated record or oversight. That clinical assessments were inconsistent, leading to difficulties comparing Yusuf over time. And routine care prior to his crisis was marked by a wait-and-see approach that failed to preempt worsening symptoms. 5-year-old Yusuf was happy, healthy and adored by his family. He died in November 2022 after being treated by Rotherham General and Sheffield Children's Hospital.
Yusuf was failed all over the weekend, and it's very sad to say Yusuf was left to die over the weekend. 13 opportunities were missed in escalating Yusuf's care.
NHS England says it accepts the report's recommendations and will work with hospitals to ensure they're carried out. This includes staff listening to and acting on a family's concerns, and the creation of a single patient record so all clinicians can access the same medical information. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says there are no excuses for the tragic failings that led to Yusuf's death. He wants all the recommendations implemented so children are safer and better cared for in the future. The family have fought and waited a long time for this moment.
We want change. We want this not to happen to any other child. Because if they don't change, there's going to be another child, another mother sat here telling you the same story again.
Yusuf's family have some answers, but questions remain. They want an inquest to explain why and how their little boy died.
Oh, well, Laura's in the studio with me now, and Laura, a really big milestone for Yusuf's family. But as we heard there in your report, they want more, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And look, this has been such an upsetting case. The report's author even writing in his report how it's one of the saddest assignments his whole team has ever worked on. We heard today very bravely from Yusuf's family, from his uncle, from his mum, describing their little boy, how he was active, full of life, full of energy. They'd said he was a very special child, clearly cherished by his whole family. I mean, their loss is really unbearable, how every day, they said, feels like an uphill struggle as they relive the trauma and remember they're now having to live their lives without him. It was just 8 days it took for him to die back in November 2022. His condition went downhill so quickly. But I think the family's big frustration was that they repeatedly raised concerns that he wasn't getting better, that he was getting worse. His mum said she could see that he was suffering, he was in pain, he was scared, and yet she put her faith in the NHS to help him. And I think for me, one of the striking things about this report is the fact that it makes this point that families really do have to be listened to, that their concerns have to be acted on, as we've seen with Martha's Rule, Martha's Law, and that's what they want to happen. But I think for the families, with all these recommendations that have been made, they say that's great, but we need to follow them through. We need to see those actions. They're hoping to meet with the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, in the coming days to discuss the report and also their concerns now, because whilst they do have a bit more information, they know more, they have some answers, they say they want change, they want accountability, and this won't happen until they have a full inquest, and they won't get that closure, they say, until they know exactly what happened to Yusuf and how he died.
OK, Laura, thank you. Laura Bundock with Yusuf Nazir's story there and the story of his family. Thank you. The Royal College of Nursing says its members could go on strike unless the government agrees to a pay rise. Now, the union rejected a 3.6% pay increase for next year in England, saying that nurses feel deeply undervalued. This comes after resident doctors finished a 5-day walkout of their own, this 12th round of strike action since their fallout with the government over pay and conditions. Well, we can speak now to Patricia Marquis, Executive Director of the Royal College of Nursing England. And thank you so much for joining us on the programme tonight. First of all, explain to us why your members rejected this pay increase, which the government says is above inflation and they feel was a fair offer.
Well, nursing pay has fallen further and further behind after years of below inflation pay rises. And this year, nurses actually received one of, if not the lowest, pay increase across the whole of the public sector. And our members are just saying, we're fed up, we keep being given promises of a solution to change things, but nothing's coming our way. And so by a massive majority, our members have voted to say it really isn't enough. And we need a pay system that reflects what nurses do, not one that means that nurses start at the bottom band and stay in that band, maybe for 30, 35 years for their entire career. It just doesn't reflect the expertise, the experience and the skills that nurses use every day in their jobs in the NHS.
Yeah, 91% of your members, 9 in 10, rejected this offer. It really is a strong feeling amongst your members. It's not just about a pay rise, it's about pay structure. You talked to us about the band system there. A nurse at entry level can go in at the lowest band on around 30 grand a year, but the top band is only around 38. So when you think of a nurse that has, you know, given her life to this profession, this is a vocation, that's not a massive increase over, a few decades, is it? 2-3 decades career.
It's not. And when you're stuck in that, I had somebody actually in tears yesterday just recounting that, how that feels to someone to feel so devalued by a system that hasn't really reflected the expertise and experience that she's gained over those years. So we are seeking a rise in the base, in the starting salary, but also a system that enables nurses to progress throughout their career and their pay to be recognised and reflect the increased responsibilities, the increased experience and expertise, education, etc. that they gain over that period. A system that is modern and reflects what nurses do now, not 20 years ago, which is when this pay system was introduced.
You're telling ministers in England to use the summer break to reach out for an agreement or face formal escalation to dispute and an industrial action ballot. So, if you don't get some movement over the summer, your members could find themselves at the ballot box, but this time voting on strike action. When you say nurses feel undervalued, we've spoken to many resident doctors here on the programme, and they've given us an idea of, their day-to-day life in their job and just how tough it is. Can you give us an idea of what nurses are going through on the front line of the NHS right now?
So, many of your watchers will know that there are often massive shortages on the wards and in the community. So people are trying to look after people in corridors. They're often working with less staff than they should have. And they're taking on more and more complex and complicated care and giving more care to patients with more complex needs. So it's physically draining, it's mentally incredibly draining, and increasingly the public recognise their value, but sadly the government doesn't. So the pressures are really significant. We can see it's more difficult to recruit nurses into nursing, less students are appearing for us, and increasingly, very sadly, we're struggling to retain experienced nurses. They're leaving before, they're due to retire, for example. People are leaving in large numbers, which means that it's really becoming unsafe for patients in some cases, and nurses really are safety critical. Aside from giving incredible care and changing people's lives, there must be enough nurses to deliver the care that patients need.
Do you have confidence that if it comes to it, strike action is the right course of action? I mean, I'm sure you've been following the resident doctor strike action. As I said, they've just finished their 12th round of strike action in this current dispute with the government. They're not getting anywhere. Why do you think that the nurses will?
So we want to avoid strike action. There are no nurses that want to go on strike. But we really are getting into an increasingly desperate situation. And we really need to send the government a message now that says, please work with us to avoid this, to avoid what our members don't want to do and what we know the public don't really want us to do. But we do know that the public see us as the most valued profession, but they also recognise that we are one of the most undervalued professions. And whilst we know it's difficult for the public, we do believe that the public would support us in recognition of the need for nurses to be able to deliver the care that they require.
Have you got a figure in mind? I know we've talked about the band system for nurses play in terms of you want that looked at again because, it hasn't been looked at for decades, and it feels to nurses unfair. But in terms of, you know, the resident doctors have gone in there with a double figure in terms of percentage-wise that they would like as a pay rise. The government come back with something far lower and will not budge from that. What is it nurses are calling for?
We really don't want to get into talking about percentages, because for us, that really isn't the solution to the crisis that we've got in nursing. We're very clear, all the evidence shows us that this isn't about the annual uplift. The problem is a fundamental problem with the system.
I get that, but I'm just thinking, you know, if government ministers come to you and go, right, OK, look, we're listening, we do not want our nurses to go on strike at the end of this year. That is the last thing we need. What do you want? Would you be satisfied with, you know, when you talk about investment in the profession, would you be satisfied with promises that don't result in a pay rise? Because at the moment, the government is saying, look, we have got a 10-year plan for the NHS. We're putting money into that. We cannot afford pay rises for doctors and nurses. That's the bald facts of the matter coming from the government at the moment.
Absolutely, and we hear what they're saying, but we also know that unless they invest in nursing, they will not be able to reform the NHS in the way they want to. And we support the reforms that they are suggesting, but it depends on having enough nurses to deliver all those changes, and there won't be. So we absolutely are committed to talking to the government. We recognise it's not an annual thing, but we do need to see absolute commitment to reform and something that will enable us to have a pay system that reflects the value of nurses.
But what does that pay system look like, Patricia? I'm just, you know, I'm not trying to sort of, you know, upset you or catch you out or anything, but when we talk about nurses being undervalued and overhauling their pay system, what is it you think nurses deserve?
So we talked earlier on around people being stuck in that initial grade, and actually it only goes up to £37,000.
Yeah.
We need people to be able to go into the next grade. We need to be able to reflect the actual work that they are doing, which takes them into over £40,000. So it's that sort of thing that we're looking for, not necessarily around an annual percentage rise, but actually a system that enables people to earn more as they increase their skill and their expertise and are able to do more and more and take on more responsibility. So it is about extra money. We absolutely acknowledge that, but it's not about saying it's about this year. It's about a reform of the system that really is not working for nurses. And we don't think the solution is a one-year percentage rise. We really do believe that the solution is a more fundamental reform that lifts the bottom so people's starting salary is higher, gives them a career and a pay system that actually reflects the work that they do, the expertise they have and the experience they give.
Listen, Patricia, really good of you to come on tonight to put across the nurses' case for this. Really appreciate your time. Patricia Marquis, their Executive Director for England from the Royal College of Nursing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, questions have been raised about whether the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, could introduce a wealth tax in the coming autumn budget. Now, a former Cabinet Minister has suggested that one should be considered by the Treasury. Analyse, who resigned as International Development Minister over the Prime Minister's decision to cut foreign aid, sat down with our political editor, Beth Rigby.
I do think that it's important we consider who has the broadest shoulders when these issues are considered. There has been, you're right, a lot of discussion going on around, in inverted commas, a wealth tax. I've been a bit sceptical about some of those claims for a long time because, of course, wealth is taxed in the UK. I think what has changed the debate, however, is the work that was undertaken by the Commission on Wealth Tax. They looked at the operation of lots of different wealth tax internationally. They looked at all of that evidence and set out how it would be possible to deliver something like that in a UK context. I would hope that the Treasury is considering that kind of evidence.
I think if Rachel Reeves was listening to this podcast, she'd absolutely hate what you just said about wealth taxes, and I think she's very opposed.
I have to say I've not spoken directly with her about this. I'm sure, as I mentioned before, she would be right to be sceptical about any claims that any of these would immediately change the fiscal situation of the government. But I think the trade-off we have to consider in a world of lots of difficult trade-offs is potentially making some big and significant changes early, or having to make many tactical changes.
Let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig. Well, it's an interesting suggestion, John. How likely is it, do you think?
Well, this debate was triggered by Neil Kinnock here on Sky News. It was the first Sunday in July on the Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips programme. And it came, of course, after that bruising week in which the government had to perform a spectacular U-turn to appease Labour backbenchers who were fighting and threatening to rebel in a vote on cuts in welfare benefits. So the debate has been raging in the Labour Party for the past 4 weeks or so. Where's the money going to come from to now that the government's not going to cut welfare benefits? Neil Kinnock's proposal was a 2% tax on assets valued over £10 million. Yes, £10 million. He said that would bring in £11 billion a year. So that is something that was not initially ruled out by the government. Rachel Reeves has in the past said she's opposed to the idea of a wealth tax, but there's no doubt that the wealthy are going to have to pay more tax in one form or another. The government presumably will not want to call it a wealth tax, but what they will probably want to do is to make sure that the wealthy, those who can afford it, the broadest shoulders, a phrase we heard from Annalise Dodds and also we hear from other politicians, those with the broadest shoulders, in other words, the most wealthy, will have to pay more tax, whether it is on capital gains, whether it is on all other sorts of income, share income, whatever. But they will face, because of the need for the Chancellor to raise more money, higher taxes in some form. But Rachel Reeves is unlikely to bow to what Annalise Dodds is calling for, a wealth tax of the sort proposed by Neil Kinnock.
John, thank you. Still to come here on the UK tonight, mixed martial arts fighter Conor McGregor loses his appeal in his civil sexual assault case. We'll have the latest for you from Dublin. Plus, a warning to parents to get their children fully vaccinated against measles following a rise in the number of cases. And plans for the Met Police to double its use of live facial recognition as it tries to crack down on violence in London, despite budget cuts.
I'm Stephen Murphy and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Mixed martial arts fighter Conor McGregor has lost his appeal in a civil case in which a Dublin woman accused him of rape. McGregor attempted to overturn a jury's decision that he was liable for the sexual assault of Nikita Hand, who alleged that the sportsman had raped her in December 2018. Our Ireland correspondent Stephen Murphy has more from outside the court.
This really was a comprehensive rejection of Conor McGregor's appeal against the November 2024 civil case jury finding that he had indeed raped a woman called Nikita Hand in a Dublin hotel back in December 2018. No criminal prosecution was ever brought off the back of that, but a civil case was brought, and at the High Court here in Dublin in November last year, that jury found in Nikita Hand's favour. Conor McGregor immediately lodged an appeal, and he had several grounds, but probably the one that garnered the most attention was the introduction of new evidence, and this was in the form of evidence given by a couple who used to live in a suburb called Drimna, right beside Nikita Hand. They were going to tell the court during the appeal that they had seen a physical altercation take place between Nikita Hand and her former partner with whom she lived in the hours immediately after her encounter with Conor McGregor. The idea being from his side that this introduced the prospect of an alternative explanation for her injuries, for her bruising. Then, on day one of the appeal here, that evidence was abruptly withdrawn just minutes before the appeal got underway. Today, when the Court of Appeal gave its verdict, 3 judges here giving that verdict, it was clear that that move was still baffling them. They said it was a move, an abandonment that was still shrouded in mystery, and ultimately approved that Nikita Hand's stance that that was a lie was correct. There were also other grounds, legal technicalities. For example, the fact that Conor McGregor said no comment around 100 times during his police interview. His team arguing that should never have been revealed to the jury. Each ground was dealt with one by one by the judge here and dismissed. One said one argument was unreal, another argument gossamer thin. It was a comprehensive destruction of Conor McGregor's legal arguments. The appeal was summarily dismissed, and then Nikita Hand came out and gave her response, her reaction to the waiting media.
This appeal has re-traumatised me over and over again. Being forced to relive it, what happened has had a huge impact on me. To every survivor out there, I know how hard it is, but please don't be silent. You deserve to be heard. You also deserve justice. Today I can finally move on and try to heal. Thank you.
Do you have any message for Conor McGregor?
No. Not right now. That's all I have to say right now, and thanks for everything.
Now, we simply don't know what Conor McGregor may do next. He wasn't here in court today, represented by his barristers. Instead, they do have the option of appealing the Court of Appeal judgment to Ireland's Supreme Court, but it is too early to know at this time if they will do so after such a comprehensive dismissal of their arguments in this Court of Appeal. As for Nikita Hand, you could really see the emotion etched on her face there as she spoke to us. Relief mixed with pain, the re-trauma, as she described it, of going through all of this again. She left clearly hoping to put this ordeal, which has stretched on for almost 7 years, behind her once and for all.
The UK's Health Security Agency is urging parents to make sure their children are fully vaccinated against measles, as levels of the disease continue to remain high in parts of England. There have been 145 new cases of measles detected this month alone. The mother of a 10-year-old girl who died from complications related to the disease believes that her daughter wouldn't have caught measles if other children had been inoculated. Renee Archer was too young to have the MMR vaccine when she caught the infection at just 5 months old. Our chief North of England correspondent Greg Milam has this report.
I always say she was the perfect child. She was my firstborn. She made me a mum. She was amazing.
Renee Archer was 10 when she died from complications of having measles as a baby. She'd caught it when she was too young to be vaccinated. If more people had been, her mum says, she may never have been infected at all. Her warning, doctors say, is one parents need to listen to.
It does make me quite sad and angry because they are potentially putting their children at risk, and I just want people to open their eyes really to someone that's actually been through it and not the nonsense that's been spreaded on social media and on telly. I just want people to be knowledgeable of how serious the situation can be.
The concern over falling rates of children receiving the measles vaccine was brought into focus by the death of a child at Alderhay Hospital in Liverpool. There's been a surge of cases in a city with one of the lowest rates in the country of children having both doses of the MMR vaccine. It's left communities short of that herd immunity where enough people are protected to prevent the virus spreading.
The vaccine's been around and in use actually for over 50 years, and it's incredibly safe. Measles is often thought of as just a routine childhood illness, but actually it's incredibly contagious, much more contagious than COVID, for example. And I think the problem is that when that's passed on, particularly in schools, nurseries and other environments where children are close together, there's a real problem with them children becoming unwell.
Doctors say it's not just public hesitancy about vaccines, but also a lack of information about their importance and difficulties getting appointments.
Is there anything that you want to know about the vaccine?
No, I'm okay.
At this catch-up clinic in Liverpool, Natalia brought her son for his MMR. She admits she'd lost track of his vaccinations, but worries that others are being misled by false information.
And that's it? You done fully vaccinated?
I think parents are trying to make the right decision, but the misinformation that is out there is overclouding their judgment. My child attends a specialist provision, in which is a school that carry children with many types of disabilities, physically and mentally. And it's really hard to see that those kids could be exposed to an illness that is quite preventable through a vaccine. I am hoping the parents will start thinking not only about their children, but also all those other children that cannot get vaccinations for numerous reasons.
It's a message that Becky Archer echoes in memory of her daughter.
She was a really caring person. She wouldn't have wanted any other family to go through losing the child.
Greg Milam, Sky News.
Still to come here on the UK Tonight. We'll have more for you on the Metropolitan Police's plans to expand its use of live facial recognition technology and why campaigners are concerned about privacy. And there is a warning that household budgets are set to be squeezed even more as we head into the autumn. Metropolitan Police is set to expand its use of live facial recognition. Britain's largest force will be using the technology up to 10 times a week. That's more than double the current use. The force said that to date it has made 1,000 arrests using the tech, 773 of which led to a charge or caution. The Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, said that the technology will only be used to look for wanted criminals or registered sex offenders. However, there are concerns that this expansion could infringe on people's privacy. Well, joining me now to discuss this announcement, former Chief Superintendent of the Metropolitan Police, Dal Babu, and Matt Mahmoodi, a researcher and advisor on AI and human rights. He is from Amnesty International UK. Good to see you both this evening. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about this. Dal, first of all, I want to get a reaction from you. This technology is already being used. It's seen as a useful tool by the Metropolitan Police, particularly as budget cuts are coming in on officers, and they're now doubling the use of it. What are your thoughts on how it could help prevent crime and catch criminals?
So, Jane, you've gone to the heart of this issue. There's huge cuts in the number of resources that the police force have, and we've seen those gaps filled by technology. And I think facial recognition is one example of it. It's important to listen to the concerns that communities have, but your figures just give you a very, very clear indication of how successful it's been, because ultimately this is about gathering intelligence, making sure that people who are causing harm to our communities are arrested and brought to justice. So I think I understand the concerns, but the technology has moved on so much that it is much safer now to use.
Yeah, Matt, how safe do you think it is? We are told that when these cameras are in use, no facial data is stored. They're essentially looking for faces that are already on the police system, wanted criminals, those known for criminal activity. And if there is no match, the image is deleted in real time. You know, if you don't find a match, the images are actually pixelated on screens. And, you know, I just said there that the Met Commissioner, Mark Rowley, says, look, you know, we are using this responsibly.
Listen, there's currently no legal basis at all for the deployment of live facial recognition. There's no act of parliament, no ratification, nothing. What we do have, however, is unequivocal clarity from international human rights law that facial recognition for mass and discriminatory surveillance is in violation of the right to privacy, the right to equality and non-discrimination, the right to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. I mean, we've even seen that in the European Union's AI Act, there is a complete ban on the usage of live facial recognition. There's a reason why we've seen companies opt themselves to impose moratoria on the technology going back to 2020. And the Met and other UK police forces' reinforcement of the technology is a regressive move against the basic rights of communities in this country.
Dal, Matt's got a point there. There is no specific legislation about this. And, you know, I was reading up earlier, you know, there are around 7 governments that already use this. And I looked at, you know, who those governments were. They were places like Russia and China. And a lot of people will know what's going on in the United States at the moment with ICE trying to find immigrants, tracking them down, deporting them. There are real concerns that, you know, while people think, oh, this is happening in the United States, it could never happen in the UK, people have genuine concerns that I'm sure the people in America thought it wasn't going to be used in this way, and yet there they are. You know, what do you say to Matt's argument that there is no legislation to effectively oversee this? We're effectively taking the Met Police's word on this, and, you know, trusted Met Police isn't great at the moment.
Right. I mean, there are concerns about the trust in the police, but I think this particular technology, and I've been monitoring this for about 20 years, and I think when it first came out, there was significant flaws in it, and it didn't recognise people of colour particularly well. So those kinds of issues have been rectified. They've been improved. There is a huge amount of scrutiny now around the use of the technology, and also the Met have been very, very clear. What they're doing is they are deleting images that are not part of the investigation and focusing on people who are known to them and sexual offenders. So I think it's a valuable tool. It's important for the Met to listen to the concerns that the communities have, but I think they've addressed those concerns. And I think at a time when resources are limited, this gives the police an opportunity to use artificial intelligence in a way to keep us all safe.
Matt, you mentioned there, concerns of the community about privacy, and I just wonder how long that kind of argument will hold, because let's face it, as individuals now, we hand out so much personal data online, whether it's our personal pictures, our date of birth, our address, our telephone number. We hand that over without a second thought on the internet. Why is this any different? Because people will say, look, if you've done nothing wrong, it doesn't matter if a camera takes your image, the police will ignore you and move on to the people who should be worried, the people they're looking for.
But that's the thing, people aren't ignored. Just last year, we saw how Sean Thompson, who's one of many Black British people, who was held and harassed by the London Met for 13 minutes outside of London Bridge after reportedly returning from a volunteer shift with the anti-knife group Street Fathers. We've seen these time and time again that people are being targeted and harassed.
I'm unfamiliar with that story. Was that as a result of live facial recognition?
That was as a result of live facial recognition. We've seen that happen time and time again. A report by Liberty.
How is that any different? I'm not saying it's right or wrong either way, but how is this any different to a regular police officer getting it wrong? Because that can happen, and the data we're getting from the Metropolitan Police is that actually this live facial recognition is a lot more accurate and has a lot more information and ability to catch a genuine criminal than a regular Bobby on the beat looking at faces has.
Even a broken clock is right twice a day. There's currently no data to actually suggest that facial recognition reduces crime, which is the predominant reason by which it is deployed. There's, however, a lot of evidence to show that it's...
But they made 1,000 arrests using LFR, 773 of which led to a charge or a caution. And, you've got places like Oxford Street in London who... the shops there will be welcoming this move from the Metropolitan Police because shoplifting is through the roof in this country. There aren't enough police officers. And if a camera can sit on Oxford Street and shops can give images to the police of the habitual shoplifters that steal from them, that's, music to their ears. That's crime prevented, crime solved.
Number of arrests of individuals done through facial recognition does not tell us how many people would have been arrested without the facial recognition. It's not a metric for how successful is being done. We know that just last year, upwards of 5 million faces were scanned by facial recognition. That is 5 million people who were subjected to a virtual police lineup without their...
Is that data not deleted?
It doesn't matter that the data is deleted, because that instant onto which it's captured, there could be a false arrest. You could be Sean Thompson on the street, coming home from what's supposed to be work that volunteers towards reducing crime. That's to say anti-knife volunteering. And you could be subject to a virtual police line.
OK, I'm going to let Dal come in on this, because obviously, Dal, you've served in the Metropolitan Police. You've seen these mistakes happen, whether it's by live facial recognition or by traditional policing. What's your thought about what Matt's been saying there?
I think the reality of the situation is that facial recognition has been successful. It's identified people who've causing harm to our communities. It's identified people who are sex offenders, people who are wanted, people who shouldn't be on the street. So, the reality is that it's been enormously successful. The genie's out the bottle, as you said, Sarah-Jane. The reality is we use our images, we use our data all over the place. So the genie's out the bottle. The key thing is to ensure that the facial recognition systems that we have are safe, are in a way ensuring the confidence of our communities. The idea that this is suddenly going to disappear is for the fairies. So it's really about understanding how we use that technology and make sure we use it in a way which ensures that we get the right people. And if there are any challenges, then we need to challenge it. But the figures speak for themselves. Over 700 arrests and have led to cautions or criminal convictions. The figures speak for themselves.
The genie's out the bottle. I mean, Matt, I don't, that sentiment I've heard so many times on the show when we discuss anything about, the Online Safety Act, the internet, or the harms that come with it. This is happening whether we like it or not, this advance in technology. It's how we use it, it's how we make it safer. And coming back to that point you made about the legislation not being there, it is the case where technology advances, we latch onto it, and then the legislation has to catch up. That is going to be the case here. What is it you want to see that if this is, as Dal said, inevitable, this is the future of policing, what is it you want to see to make it work properly and benefit communities?
There is no version of facial recognition that's compatible with international law. It doesn't matter how you go about it. The way that the system is trained itself goes against the right to privacy. So we want to see the safeguard that says a prohibition on live facial recognition. I mean, it's a part of EU law. Many cities have opted to have prohibitions in place against live facial recognition, and also in some cases retrospective facial recognition. There's a reason we want to see this, and part of it is also, strictly speaking, you look 2 years ago at the Casey review, and you'll see that the Met was conclusively institutionally racist, misogynistic, and homophobic. Do we really want to embolden a force who already has propensities towards deeply discriminatory behavior with this technology that only stands to augment those practices? It's simply unacceptable.
Good points made by both of you this evening. Thank you so much for contributing to this discussion. Matt Mahmoodi there, researcher and advisor on AI and human rights for Amnesty International, and Dal Babu, former Chief Superintendent with the Metropolitan Police. Thank you for your time this evening. Really appreciate it. Still to come here on the programme, why the cost of your weekly shop could be going up once again. Plus, a Formula One world champion Max Verstappen outlines his future plans.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
David Garrido is here with the sport, and Max Verstappen has confirmed he is staying with Red Bull for the next Formula One season. Big news tonight.
It's big news. It was the biggest question, wasn't it? Especially in the wake of Christian Horner leaving as CEO and team principal at Red Bull. So he's confirmed he'll stay for 2026 at least. He is contracted beyond that, but really he had been exploring options. We know that Mercedes had been kind of keen on him. And remember that, this is a man who's not used to his current position. So, Max Verstappen preparing for the Hungarian Grand Prix. He's only won 2 of the 13 Grand Prix until now. He did actually win the sprint race at Spa. That was the last Grand Prix weekend in Belgium. But in terms of an actual Grand Prix, hasn't done it that often, and it is the McLarens who are dominant. So what he said is, never really said anything about it because I was just focused on talking to the team about how we can improve our performance government's future ideas for next year, and that's why I have nothing to add. But I think it's time to basically stop all the rumours, and for me, it's always been quite clear that I was staying anyway.
What does it mean for John Russell then?
Well, yeah, because he was the one that I think was also affected by this, wasn't he?
Yeah.
You know, that he could depose George Russell at Mercedes. He's also still needing to negotiate a new contract, but as it stands, the driver transfer market might be quite quiet.
Yeah.
Normally, this is when it hots up, but for George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, they could be set at Mercedes. Ferrari looks set with Leclerc and with Lewis Hamilton, even though Lewis hasn't had the best seasons. McLaren's absolutely set with Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris doing great work. So it looks like, for the time being, as long as he can sort his own future out, George Russell will stay at Mercedes. But yeah, big news in the world of Formula One, and also a quite bizarre day at the Oval for the cricket.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
You got more chance of winning the lottery than making it as a professional footballer.
I think your responsibility is to guide them in the same direction as I went myself.
Things aren't just handed to you on a plate. I think you have to fight for them, and it's probably only the tough that survive, really.
Natural skills is not enough.
The impact has to be straight away.
Don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do.
If you have that belief, then that's the most important thing.
Keep it fun for as long as possible. If you love what you do, you'll be able to get through the tougher times.
If you're going to make it as a professional, pressure's coming, so we don't want the kids feeling it prematurely.
The top club, we don't have time and space to grow up the young. He plays if he's good enough.
Whether it's playing in the parks, competing in cages, or showcasing skills on the streets, for so many young boys, the dream is to become a professional footballer.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Now, there is a warning that household budgets are set to be squeezed even more as we head into the autumn. The British Retail Consortium predicts food inflation will rise to 6% by the end of this year, posing a significant challenge in the run-up to Christmas. I mean, we're only just about to dip our toe into August, and I got an alert from the Sky News app this morning that said Christmas food price shock looms. So how can you keep the cost of your shop down? Joining me now is Sarah Pennells, Consumer Finance Specialist at insurer and investment company Royal London. So, Sarah, what exactly is happening? Why are our food prices going to go up again?
Yeah, as you say, that there is this warning that food price inflation is going to start rising again towards the end of the year. But it already has, actually. I mean, overall, inflation has been ticking back up again recently. But food price inflation has been part of that. That's been a big part of the reason why overall inflation rates have been edging up. And it's a sort of a number of reasons, partly because the costs of production have gone up because of things like minimum wage rise. And although energy bills are lower than they have been, they're not that low in the grand scheme of things. I think one of the things, though, is when we hear that food prices are going to start rising again more sharply, it's something that is very worrying for a lot of people, especially because we've lived through the last couple of years where we could see prices rising kind of almost daily, weekly when we went to the supermarket. If there is any sort of good news, sort of glimmer of hope, I think it is that overall people's finances aren't in the state they were in sort of in 2022 and 2023 when food prices were really racing ahead. And we've been following how people have been affected by the cost of living crisis as it was originally and now by ongoing higher bills. And there is overall, people are in a better position, but not everybody is. Almost 1 in 5 people tell us they have no money left at the end of the month or they're overdrawn. So for them, any increase in prices, never mind food price inflation increasing itself, is going to be very worrying news.
Yeah, we know that so many people are in a difficult position because, food banks tell us that, they're getting more people visiting them than ever before. That number keeps going up. If people are worried, what kind of things can they do? What practical measures can they take, Sarah?
Yeah, so although this is obviously not great news, it is concerning. I would say, first of all, don't panic, because we're not going to see prices sort of across the board or racing away. It tends to be some prices will rise, others less so. And we do have sort of competitive supermarkets. I mean, they do compete with each other. And we know, because our research tells us this, that people have been saying they've been able to save money by, buying cheaper, sort of using vouchers, using money off deals, switching to cheaper brands, to cheaper supermarkets, teaming up with others and buying in bulk. There are things you can do that don't mean that you have to go without food to save money. And I think another key message is, if you are really struggling, and again, we know that some people really are struggling and are unable to pay their household bills, I think a lot of people want to feel like they can sort it out on themselves, but don't delay asking for help, because not everyone's problem can necessarily be solved by help that's available, but there is a lot more help than people think. And the earlier you ask for help, whether that's your energy company, a debt advice charity, or so on, the more options there are then to help you.
And we've only got 30 seconds, but one of the key bits of advice is check for benefit eligibility, because some people are eligible for benefits and they've got no idea. So only 30 seconds to explain how they can find out about that.
Yeah, there are a number of free-to-use calculators. There's one on a charity called Turn to Us. So the website is turn2us.org.uk. It's confidential, it's free to use. Pop your details in. It will tell you what benefits you're entitled to and how much, and how to apply for them. It really is worth doing.
Sarah Pennell's absolute pro, finishing with 15 seconds to go, which gives me time to say goodbye. Sarah Pennell's there. Thank you so much. That's it from the UK tonight. We are taking a short break for the summer period and we'll return in September. Yalda's next.